grey-winged silhouettes perched atop cathedral spires and high-rising towers, their forms capturing the shifting glow of neon signs and moonlight alike. For centuries, these stone guardians had watched over the sprawling metropolis of Luthadel from their vantage points on parapets and rooftops. Their faces were carved in snarling, beastly visages, but in the hearts of the city's people, the gargoyles were revered watchers who silently protected them from unseen evils. While the gargoyles' presence had knitted itself into the city's very identity, few residents knew the truth behind their existence, that centuries ago they had been bound to protect Luthadel by way of an ancient magical pact. By day, the gargoyles were nothing but inert stone statues, fixtures of the skyline and architectural wonders. By night, when the pact allowed, they stirred to life to patrol the streets, ensuring the safety of the citizens. This arrangement never changed, at least not until the arrival of the rebellious sorcerer known as Osric Le Noir. Osric once resided within the marble walls of the Arcana Conservatory, a sanctuary dedicated to Luthadel's wizards and their stored knowledge, along with relics from ages past. He had been an ambitious apprentice, poring over dusty tomes on advanced transmutation magic. Some said that Osric's thirst for power was rooted in childhood humiliations when he was overlooked for more prestigious apprenticeships. Others insisted he sought knowledge for its own sake. Whatever his true motivation, Osric came to resent the hidden constraints placed upon arcane practitioners' laws that, in his eyes, stifled experimentation and innovation. In the city square, the statue of Armand Soresso, one of Luthadel's ancient founders, loomed where citizens gathered for festival. According to legend, Armand had forged the original pact to protect the city from monstrous threats lurking in the mountains. Since his passing, the gargoyles had been compelled to serve as guardians. They never complained, never showed fear or emotion, just a silent presence that watched over everyone, awake or asleep. One mild summer night, Osric completed a ritual that shook the foundations of Luthadel's magical order. He had spent weeks tracking down fragments of an obscure incantation rumored to remove the shackles of servitude from magical creatures. The law had nearly been lost, for it was deemed too dangerous to be recorded openly. Yet Osric believed that forcibly binding the gargoyles was a crime. Whether from genuine moral outrage or a twisted notion of setting them free for his own schemes, he set out to shatter Armand Soresso's ancient pact. Under the hush of midnight, Osric climbed the east tower of the old city hall, where a particularly prominent gargoyle perched. Lightning flickered in the distance, faint rumbles of thunder echoing through the sky. He lit unholy green flames in a brazier, chanting forbidden words inscribed on a scrap of grim parchment. The gargoyle fixed a motionless stare on him, its eyes carved to reflect a permanent watchfulness. Osric poured a potion of black ichor over the gargoyle's stone forehead, continuing his incantation until the air trembled with a surge of unbound magic. A sudden rush of wind roared between the buildings. The gargoyle's eyes flared with an intense red luminescence. Elsewhere across Luthadel among cathedrals, rooftops and parapets, stone guardians awakened. Their stony joints groaned, talons scraping the stone beneath them. It was an awakening unlike any other. Before this night, they awoke already bound to their duties. Now they emerged from slumber with a sense of autonomy, perhaps even anger. In the swirling wind, Osric felt a burst of triumph. He lifted his arms, a manic grin splitting his features. "I set you free," he declared. "No longer must you remain slaves to a pact you never consented to." The gargoyle turned its head, cracked its stiff neck, and seemed to stretch under the pale moonlight. Then, as if to test its new power, it leapt from the tower, soared with powerful wings, and vanished into the darkness. Across the city, the same phenomenon repeated itself. Gargoyles stirring to life, not to guard, but to roam with new autonomy. In the old quarter, half a dozen gargoyles perched on a steep church rooftop launched into the sky. Another cluster along the high-rises in the commerce district stretched their wings, gazing down upon the throng of cars and pedestrians with inscrutable expressions. Some soared into the clouds, letting out eerie, triumphant screeches. Alarmed by the cacophony of wings and roars, citizens looked up from the sidewalks, from inside their parked cars, from behind the windows of their lofty apartments. The stone watchers they'd once trusted were in motion, but something felt off. Their movements were no longer calm, methodical patrols. These were free creatures, their minds unshackled, and no one could predict what they might do next. The following morning, panic seized Lutherdale as people realized that every gargoyle had either disappeared from its resting place or else soared overhead, watching with unfamiliar independence in their glowing eyes. City officials held emergency sessions at City Hall. Among them was High Magus Sarah de Greyfall, the leader of the Arcana Conservatory. She was a tall, stern woman draped in crimson robes, with a single silver chain set with a pendant shaped like a lion's head. Alongside her was a council of lesser mages, each apprehensive about the events of the previous night and the unexpected shift of gargoyle loyalties. "They no longer recognize the ancient Pact," Sarita announced with a hardened expression. "My best guess is that the chain binding them was dissolved. I suspect Osric Lenoir is behind this." An outcry rippled through the council. Over the preceding months, Osric's rebellious nature had caused rumors to swirl, yet nobody had anticipated a move so audacious, so destructive in its potential consequences. "Is there any way to reforge the Pact?" asked Councilman Pender, a short man with anxious eyes. "To reforge it, we'd first need the Great Seal of Cereso, which vanished decades ago from our archives," Sarita replied. "And even if we had it, the gargoyles' new awareness might lead them to refuse. We always believed they were mindless extensions of the city's magic, but perhaps they merely had no choice." Silence enveloped the chamber. In unspoken agreement, they realized that the gargoyles might see humanity's centuries-long arrangement as an enslavement. Now freed, would they choose peace with the city or something else? Across Lutherdale, the gargoyles were slowly testing their independence. Some nested by abandoned buildings, others crept through dark alleyways, frightened citizens scattering. Even so, there was minimal aggression at first. The gargoyles had no interest in brutality for its own sake. They were discovering themselves. Osric, however, had grander ambitions. Hidden in a derelict clock tower near the outskirts, he carried out experiments on gargoyle magic. He was certain their ancient stone bodies could be harnessed to craft unstoppable guardians of his own design, ones who would obey him out of genuine respect, or perhaps fear, once he demonstrated his rightful power. As the days passed, murmurs of discontent spread. The city's power brokers, wealthy industrialists, and council members insisted on a magic-based crackdown. They funded a task force of mercenaries and hired a freshly assembled unit of battle mages to hunt down the gargoyles, hoping to forcibly restore the old order. Sarita, torn between a desire for peace and the mounting pressure from the council, could only watch helplessly as these squads roamed the streets. They were quick to resort to violence, and attempts at communication with the gargoyles went nowhere. Meanwhile, a young mage named Karina Montello observed the chaos. She worked in the Arcana Conservatory's library, cataloguing arcane texts and artifacts. Karina had always admired gargoyles for their silent vigilance. She would linger at the library windows each night, watching them circle under moonlit sky. Now, with the ancient pact ruptured, she felt their confusion and anger. Determined to bridge the gap, she left the city watchers in search of a way to contact the gargoyles peacefully. One cloudy twilight, Karina ventured onto the narrow ledge of an abandoned belfry. The battered rope ladder swayed beneath her feet as she climbed, her heart hammering in her chest. She had heard whispers of gargoyles roosting at this site. Reaching the top, she found herself eye to eye with an imposing gargoyle perched on the edge, its stony wings folded around its body. She carefully extended her hands. I'm not here to harm you. I only want to talk. The gargoyle's glowing red eyes narrowed. Even though it occupied the shell of a stone beast, the intelligence behind its gaze was palpable. I see you, came a raspy, resonant voice. Its strange timbre reverberated. What do you want? She swallowed hard. I want to help. Us humans and gargoyles. I believe we were meant to be in harmony, not ruled by oppression. The gargoyle's claws scraped the stones, but it did not move to strike. We know the city hunts us now. For centuries, you humans used us as shields without our consent. We were created to fight your battles, guard your walls. Now that we are free, you seek to bind us again. Karina shook her head. I don't. Many don't. But there are those in power who fear what might happen if they lose your protection. The gargoyle's eyes dimmed momentarily. We never knew we had a choice until now. A sorcerer shattered our chains, yet we are uncertain of his motives. Our kind is scattered, confronted by conflicting impulses. We are newly awakened, and the city's fear does not ease our confusion. Karina watched its wings twitch, as though reflecting its uncertainty. A pang of empathy rose within her. I want to help you find a path that doesn't involve violence or re-enslavement. Will you trust me enough to try? The gargoyle tilted its head. I am Tyrell. Some of us call ourselves the Stone Watchers. Others do not even know what to call themselves anymore. A low sigh escaped it. We have waited a long time for freedom. We do not wish to be cornered into war. After a pause, Karina asked, Do you know where Osric Lenoir is? Tyrell's lips curled back in what might have been a smile or a grimace. He continues his magic in the outskirts. We sense surges of power. That man meddles with forces he scarcely grasps. We brood on how he might be using us. The meeting ended amicably. Karina vowed to rally those who sought negotiation rather than a crackdown, while Tyrell promised to speak with his compatriots about a potential compromise. Neither realized how drastically events would accelerate. Beneath the clock tower's cracked face, Osric had gathered a small retinue of misguided mages enthralled by his rebellious rhetoric. He had begun forging gargoyle-like constructs out of leftover pieces of broken statues, an unholy fusion of rock and raw arcane energy. Rather than free will, these constructs were designed for obedience to his command. They represented his vision of an army, unstoppable, unshackled from emotion, except for a relentless drive to fulfill Osric's will. One stormy evening, the gargoyles sensed the abominations stirring. They felt a distortion in the magic that now suffused their free minds, as if a reflection of themselves was being recast in a twisted shape. Groups of gargoyles winged toward the outskirts, drawn to discover the source of the disturbance. As they approached the tower, Osric's abominations streamed out, stone limbs clacking, eyes glimmering with arcane light. The real gargoyles recoiled, outraged. These false creations mocked their newfound autonomy. Osric stepped onto a balcony overhead, long black coat whipped by the wind. My friends, he intoned, voice magnified by a vocal enchantment. It was I who freed you. Join me in removing the old order that would enslave you once more. Together, we can rule Lutherdel. Some gargoyles hovered in the rain, uncertain. Others bristled. A few soared away, mistrustful of how the sorcerer claimed dominion. Tyrell, perched at the tower's edge, hissed low. You set us free, but now you seek to twist our destiny for your gain. Osric's face contorted with mania. Fools! I gave you free will. Don't you want to use it to shape the city in your own image rather than remain an outcast on these rooftops? Will you surrender your future to fearful humans who still call you monsters? His abominations stirred, inching forward with menacing, jerky motions. Tyrell growled. We want what was never given to us before, a choice. You have no right to claim our loyalty by fear, Osric sneered, raising a staff that crackled with black lightning. Then you leave me no choice but to demonstrate my power. I will prove that your future lies with me, or you will be ground to rubble." He unleashed a bolt of crackling magic at Tyrell, who soared straight upward, narrowly avoiding the lethal strike. The real gargoyles let out a chorus of shrieks, scattering into the storm-tossed sky. At that moment, a force of city-hired mercenaries arrived. They were equipped with enchanted crossbows that glowed with arcane symbols. Among them stood several lesser battle mages from the Arcana Conservatory, staff tips blazing with conjured fire. They too had tracked the spike of Osric's magic and come to quell what they believed was a gargoyle uprising. The nighttime air transformed into a war zone as crossbow bolts whistled, bursts of flame lit the darkness, and stone wings flapped in a storm-lashed fury. Karina, who had arrived moments behind the mercenaries after convincing Serida to let her parley, watched in horror as the scene dissolved into chaos. The real gargoyles were besieged from both sides, by the abominations trying to corral them into Osric's service, and by mercenaries aiming to eliminate gargoyles. Karina screamed, "Stop! You're attacking the wrong ones!" But her voice was lost in the din of exploding spells and howling wind. Tyrell dove through the sky, deflecting a barrage of searing embers hurled by a battle mage. With an agile pivot, he crashed into one of the abominations, shattering its torso in a spray of stony fragments. Beside him, two more real gargoyles roared defiance, weaving through crossbow fire and smashing apart the constructs. Yet the mercenaries, failing to distinguish friend from foe, rained bolts upon any gargoyle in sight. Osric watched from the balcony, a storm of dark power swirling around his staff. He chanted malevolent words, summoning swirling runes that glowed purple in the night sky. The runes spread across the heavens, forming a lattice that pulsed like a spiderweb of arcane force. Karina realized with mounting dread that this was a containment ward, a monstrous circle that would trap every gargoyle in the area, real or artificial. She could almost taste the raw magic in the air. Bracing herself, she sprinted through the volley of crossbow bolts and hurtled up the crumbling spiral staircase into the tower. Rainwater slicked the steps, and thunder rattled the stone. She nearly lost her footing but pushed onward, determined to stop Osric from completing the final lines of his incantation. Reaching the tower's top floor, Karina slammed open a wrought iron door and confronted the sorcerer. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" she shouted over the rising wind. "You're trapping them all in a prison for your power trip." Osric's eyes flickered with mania. "I'll do what the council never dared. With gargoyles truly free, combined with my constructs, I'll reshape Luthadel into a city deserving of the new age. No more lies. No more hidden pacts." "But you're just forging a different kind of slavery," Karina retorted. "You claim to free them, yet you create abominations that obey only you. You're no savior." As lightning forked across the sky, Karina seized a scrap of magical parchment from her satchel. The text was originally an old failsafe, a partial incantation that might unravel wards from within. She had hurriedly inscribed the finishing details after scouring the conservatory's library. While no one guaranteed its success, it was her best chance. Osric noticed the parchment. He hissed, launching a dark projectile at her. Karina ducked behind a broken column, the impact blasting fragments of stone in all directions. Shaking dust off her hair, she recited fragments of the incantation to unravel his ward. Arcane sparks danced around her, forming a shimmering sphere of golden light. Outside, Tyrell and his fellow gargoyles were battered from all sides, pinned down with crossbow bolts that chipped and cracked their stony hides. The abominations fought like puppets, to Osric's will, mindless, which made them both relentless and easily replaced. Nonetheless, the gargoyles refused to yield. Some soared behind the lines, scattering frightened mercenaries. Others crashed directly into abominations. The storm overhead crackled, the swirling runes intensifying in color. A luminous web of energy began tightening around them all, inch by inch. In the tower, Karina forced herself to continue chanting, "Renatio, fractum, volatum, exsolvo." Each word radiated from her in a wave of golden power. Osric bellowed, channeling a swirl of black lightning, determined to maintain his ward. Their magic clashed in the air, colliding in a brilliant, violent display. Torrential rainfall pounded the rooftop, turning everything slick with water. Osric, locked in a power struggle, grimaced as Karina's incantation slowly ate into his runic web. With a final cry, she poured every ounce of will into the parchment's incantation, unleashing a surge of bright, crackling sparks toward him. The runic lines overhead flickered, wavered, and then imploded in a burst of stinging light. Thunder boomed so loudly the windows in the nearby buildings shattered. With the ward dismantled, the magical abominations seized up, twitching uncontrollably. Their puppet master's concentration had shattered. Tyrell saw his chance. He and a dozen gargoyles dived upon the false gargoyles, smashing them to rubble. Freed from the encroaching lattice, the gargoyles soared upward, letting out triumphant shrieks. Seeing his constructs destroyed, Osric howled in rage. His staff crackled with chaotic energy, sending arcs of black lightning dancing across the tower. Before he could gather that power into a cohesive strike, Tyrell swooped in from overhead. With stone talons extended, he grasped Osric's staff and wrenched it free. The staff tumbled over the balcony, lost in the driving rain. Osric tried to conjure another spell, but Tyrell's stony claw closed around the sorcerer's arm. Osric hissed in pain, still defiant. "You would be nothing without me. I gave you your freedom." Tyrell's eyes blazed red, reflecting fury tempered by sorrow. "We deserve our freedom, but not through enslavement to a new master." With a fluid motion, he slammed the sorcerer against a debris-strewn wall. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the strains of desperation on Osric's face. Karina darted forward, breath heaving from her efforts. "Don't kill him," she pleaded. "He must answer for his crimes. Let the Arcana Conservatory handle his punishment. He can't do any more harm if we strip him of his magic." Tyrell's grip eased, and he nodded. Osric slumped to the floor, unconscious from the blow. The rain eased somewhat, and the swirling clouds began to part. Looking out over the city from the tower, Karina saw the mercenaries lowering their weapons in confusion. Their main reason for fighting Osric's abominations was gone. The true gargoyles, though battered, still soared overhead, uncertain about what might happen next. For the moment, the fighting stopped. Karina guided Tyrell down the broken staircase, hauling Osric's limp body between them. Outside, Sarita Gravefall and a contingent of mages in official robes had arrived, having intervened to halt the mercenaries once they realized some gargoyles were fighting against Osric, not against the city. At the base of the tower, Serida's stern gaze took in everything: the rubble of shattered constructs, gargoyles roosting warily on ruined architecture, and Karina's exhausted face. Karina exhaled. "It's over for now. Osric's ward and his abominations are destroyed." Serida nodded, stepping closer to Tyrell, who loomed protectively behind Karina. "I misjudged you and your kind," she confessed. "We were too quick to assume you'd turned against us. But you never wanted war." Tyrell's stony features were unreadable, but his gaze transmitted weariness. "We are free and we wish to remain so. We have protected the city for centuries because we had no choice. Now we wish to protect ourselves. Only if we can stand as equals might some of us choose to help the city again." Seriada inclined her head, something close to respect in her demeanor. "That might be possible, but times will be complicated. Many in Luthadel are frightened of beings they cannot control." Looking up, Karina spoke softly. "We need a new accord, one that the gargoyles willingly accept. Not a servitude, but a partnership. If they choose it." The swirl of wind carried away the last echoes of thunder. Daybreak hinted at the horizon. One by one, the gargoyles that had battled through the night assembled around Tyrell, curious about what would happen next. High Magus Greyfall dismissed the remaining mercenaries, ensuring they lowered their weapons. Weariness remained, but so did the stirring of something like promise. As dawn brightened the heavens, the gargoyles would normally return to their petrified state, perched as mere decorations until the next moonrise. But now, freed of the ancient Pact's rigid terms, they discovered they could decide for themselves. Some might revert to stone in daytime to rest, while others remained animate, exploring the city they had only ever known from the vantage points of rooftops. Karina lowered his gaze to Karina, who still stood with droplets of rain clinging to her hair. Your city is safer now, but free will comes with new responsibilities. We are no longer watchers, enforced by an ancient pact. If we stand guard again, it will be because we have chosen to protect what we cherish. That might be your city, or it might be our own society, our own future. Karina bowed her head. And we will have to earn that trust. Together, we can shape the city into a place where no one is forced into bonds they never chose. She paused, eyes shining. Thank you for sparing Osric, and for choosing not to punish us all for the sins of the past. Tyrell inclined his head, something akin to a soft glint in his red eyes. We are creatures of stone, unyielding perhaps, but even stone can change shape if the sculptor has a gentle hand. The silent mood stretched, broken only by the rustling of wings and the distant clank of mercenary armor. Serida Greyfall quietly motioned for her mages to restrain Osric magically. He would answer before the Arcana Conservatory for his crimes, shattering the Pact without negotiation, summoning abominations, endangering all sides. Yet what Karina and Tyrell had accomplished overshadowed that gloom. A chance for the Stonewatchers and the city to redefine their connection. Some gargoyles leapt into the brightening sky, skimming Luthadell's rooftops. Others lumbered across the streets, ignoring the wide-eyed stares of onlookers. Parents held their children's hands a little tighter, unsure of whether to be awed or terrified at the stony shapes strolling past. Hope, fragile as it was, dawned on the city as well. People noticed that the gargoyles weren't launching an attack. Instead, they seemed curious, reticent, as though discovering a world they had only glimpsed for centuries. Slowly, the city's guardians had become its equals, one step at a time. Perhaps old prejudices and newfound uncertainties would strain any future forging of alliances. Yet one thing remained certain: the Stonewatchers would never again be mere extensions of an ancient compulsion. They had claimed their own fate, and Luthadel would never be the same. Karina and Serida left the tower side by side, both heavy with relief and reflection. A newly risen sun cast shimmering light across broken columns and soaking stones, turning them into glints of gold. Tyrell followed, a silent sentinel no longer bound, but still present. Some gargoyles soared overhead in graceful arcs, their shadows sweeping across building facades. Somewhere deep in the city, a clock chimed a new hour. Wherever they might roost in the coming nights, the gargoyles, now finally free, would decide for themselves which streets to watch over, which homes or cathedrals to guard. Their vantage above the city had not changed, yet everything else had. Community, if it were to be built, would require both sides to forsake their assumptions and approach each other as allies, rather than wards and wardens. For the first time in centuries, the Watchers were truly awake, aware of their own purpose and the choices laid out before them. And for the first time, Luthadel realized that those silent gargoyles were not ornaments, not forced guardians, but living beings, deserving of respect and freedom. In that fledgling acknowledgement, a new concord might be possible, one not built upon fear or subjugation, but genuine partnership. High in the drizzle-washed sky, Tyrell turned in a final spiral before gliding away, 2 gargoyles at his wingtips. City dwellers, huddled below umbrellas or perched behind windows, watched that graceful flight. Questions swirled in the city's collective mind. Would the gargoyles remain to protect them, or would they depart for some secluded place, far from human demands? At the base of the tower, Karina wiped rain from her brow and looked to Serida. We should prepare a formal meeting, something that includes the gargoyles. Let them see the city's official willingness to talk. Serida's eyes scanned the sky. Indeed, the old ways are broken. A new approach is overdue. Claps of thunder lingered in the distance, but the morning was emerging into a day brimming with possibilities. Osric le Noir had broken the ancient pact, unleashing chaos. Yet that very chaos had shattered old assumptions, compelling the city to address the truth they had long ignored. The gargoyles had never asked to be guardians, even if they had dutifully fulfilled that role. Now, both city and gargoyles stood on the precipice of forging something infinitely more precious than a forced magical bond. A shared understanding. Karina closed her eyes for a moment, releasing a breath that contained all her pent-up tension and fear. She pictured the future, a future in which gargoyles soared across the skyline not by compulsion but by choice, offering protection because they believed in coexisting with the humans below. And in that hopeful vision, Luthadel itself would be changed, perhaps for the better. A final swirl of mist drifted through the street as dawn painted the city's stone and steel in hues of soft gold. Though the storm had passed, droplets clung to gargoyle talons and arching tails, shining like unspoken promises. One era was gone, the era of silent watchers bound to a centuries-old vow. In its place rose a new chapter, uncertain but alive with potential. And thus, beneath the shifting sky, the Stone Watchers began writing their own story at last.